Imagine a world carved by ice and stone, a land of deep fjords and dense, dark forests. This was Scandinavia. This was the crucible where the human spirit was forged into something new. Here a child was born not just into a family, but into a saga. Their first lessons were not from books, but from the world itself. The whisper of the wind taught them about the changing seasons. The bite of the cold taught them resilience. The vast starry sky above their longhouse was their first map, a cosmic tapestry hinting at worlds beyond their own. Every day was a lesson in survival, an apprenticeship with nature itself. A Viking childhood was a constant, active education. Young boys and girls learned the ways of the farm, tending to livestock. They learned to track animals through the dense woods, their senses sharpened by necessity. Girls were taught to spin wool, to weave cloth, and to manage the complex workings of a household. Boys learned to work with wood and iron, their small hands mimicking their fathers. These were not mere chores. They were the fundamental skills that bound their community together. The line between play and preparation was beautifully blurred. Games were often tests of strength and agility. Children wrestled in the snow. They practiced archery with small bows, their targets set against ancient trees. They learned to wield wooden swords and shields, their playful duels, a rehearsal for the serious business of life. They were building more than muscle. They were building character, discovering the courage that lived within their own hearts. From this early age, the sea was their constant companion. It was a source of food, a highway for travel, and a vast, mysterious entity. They learned to read its moods, to understand its currents, and to respect its immense power. They would watch the longships return, their sails full, carrying tales of distant shores. The sea's horizon was not a boundary, it was an invitation, whispering of adventure and discovery. As adolescence dawned, the playful training of childhood sharpened into a focused discipline. A young Viking was on a path to becoming a warrior. The training intensified. They learned to handle the weight of a real iron axe, to feel the balance of a spear in their hand. They mastered the shield wall, a brilliant tactic where individual strength was magnified into an unbreakable collective defense. It was a dance of steel and courage, a physical expression of community. Each warrior was a single vital point of light, but together they formed a brilliant constellation of strength. They were becoming the instruments of their people's will. This transformation was not just physical, it was a journey of the mind and spirit. To become a warrior was to accept a code of honor. Loyalty to one's chieftain and kin was paramount. Courage in the face of overwhelming odds was the highest virtue. Reputation, or what they called doma, was everything. It was the story that would be told about you long after your time on this earth had passed. And what vessel would carry these ambitions across the waves? The longship. This was a masterpiece of human ingenuity, a stunning fusion of art and engineering. Its shallow draft allowed it to navigate both the open ocean and shallow rivers. Its flexible, clinker-built hull could bend with the waves, making it resilient in the fiercest storms. At its prow, a fearsome dragon-head, carved with exquisite detail, was not just for intimidation. It was a symbol of their own untamable spirit, a declaration to the world that they were coming. The moment a young warrior first stepped onto the deck of a longship was a profound rite of passage. It was the moment they truly answered the call of the sea. They learned to hoist the massive square sail, to catch the wind that would carry them to unknown fates. They learned to pull in unison on the long oars. They left the familiar fjords behind, their eyes fixed on the horizon. They were no longer just farmers or craftsmen. They were explorers. They were adventurers. Their journeys began. The longships, powered by wind and muscle, became vessels of discovery. They pushed into the vast, unknown Atlantic. They reached the shores of Iceland, a land of fire and ice, and built a new society there. They ventured further still, to the green coasts of Greenland. And from there, they made a leap that would not be repeated for another 500 years. They sailed to the shores of North America, a place they called Vinland. Imagine the sheer audacity. They were charting the planet, using the sun and stars as their guides, their courage as their fuel. They were expanding the known world 1 league at a time, but their voyages were not always peaceful. The word Viking itself originally meant something akin to a pirate raid. In lands like England and France, their arrival was often sudden and violent. Monasteries rich with gold and silver but poorly defended were prime targets. To the people who witnessed these raids, the Vikings were a terrifying force, a storm unleashed from the sea. Yet, from another perspective, this was a survival strategy. Their own homelands were harsh and overpopulated. They sought resources, land, and a foothold in a wider, richer world. This was a cosmic collision of cultures, a chaotic, transformative, and often brutal process. However, the story of the Vikings is not just one of raiding. They were also savvy traders and merchants. They established vast and complex trade networks that stretched from the North Atlantic all the way to Constantinople and Baghdad. They sailed down the great rivers of Eastern Europe, establishing cities like Kiev. In these far-flung markets, they traded furs, amber and walrus ivory for silks, spices and silver from the Arab world. They were connectors. They were the threads that wove disparate parts of the world together, transmitting goods, ideas and even DNA across immense distances. The Viking was as much a merchant as he was a warrior. These interactions changed them as much as they changed the lands they visited. They absorbed new ideas, new technologies, and new faiths. Vikings who settled in places like Normandy in France or the Danelaw in England gradually assimilated. They became part of the local fabric, their own culture blending with those they had once conquered. They were not a static people. They were dynamic, adaptable, and constantly evolving. Their epic journey was not just across the sea, but across cultures, a transformative voyage that reshaped the map of Europe. What was life like back in the lands they called home? It was centered around the Longhouse, a large communal dwelling built of timber and turf. Inside, a long fire pit ran down the center, providing warmth, light, and a place to cook. Families lived and worked together, their lives interwoven with the cycles of the seasons. The sagas, epic poems of heroes and gods, were recited on long winter nights, preserving their history and values. This was the anchor, the heart of their world. Daily life was a testament to their hard work and craftsmanship. Men tended the farms, fished the fjords, and practiced their skills as blacksmiths and woodworkers. Women managed the household, a domain of immense responsibility. They preserved food for the winter, cared for the children, and produced the textiles that clothed their families and powered their ships' sails. Viking society, while patriarchal, granted women more rights than many other European cultures of the time. They could own property, inherit land, and even divorce their husbands. They were the strong, steady core around which Viking life revolved. But all ages must pass. The Viking Age, this incredible explosion of energy and exploration, began to wane around the 11th century. The reasons are complex, a confluence of many streams. Christianity gradually spread throughout Scandinavia, replacing the Old Norse gods and bringing with it a different worldview. The kingdoms of Europe grew stronger and better organized, making raids less profitable and more dangerous. The Vikings themselves were changing, forming their own centralized kingdoms in Denmark, Norway and Sweden, becoming more like their European neighbours. The era of the freelance raider and explorer was drawing to a close, yet they did not simply vanish. They left an indelible mark on the cosmos of human history. Their legacy lives on in the DNA of millions, in the place names scattered across Britain and Normandy, and in the words they gave to the English language like sky, skin and law. They left us the spirit of exploration, the courage to sail beyond the horizon into the unknown. They showed us what a small group of determined people can do when they combine ingenuity with bravery. Their story is a reminder that we are all explorers, standing on the shores of a cosmic ocean, with a universe of wonders waiting to be discovered. That is the enduring saga of the Vikings.